Hello and welcome to today's episode of Courage Permission Slip. I am your host, Kia, and today I am so pleased and happy to welcome my friend, my coach, and someone who I just think is an all-around inspiring badass, Bri Seeley. And I want to tell you just a little bit about her. Bri, who is Google's #1 entrepreneur coach, by the way, helps entrepreneurs create long-term, sustainable success on their terms. She distills 14 years of real-world experience into easily digestible and tangible tools to help entrepreneurs go from zero to profit. Bri knows that one size never fits all, and so her approach is customized and tailor-made to help each client monetize their vision. Bri was awarded a Silver Stevie Award in 2020 for Coach of the Year in Business and a Bronze Stevie Award in 2020 for Woman of the Year in Business Services. She is a member of the Forbes Coaches Council and author of the best-selling book, Permission to Leap. Bri's expertise has been featured in over 50 press outlets, including Good Morning America, The Today Show, Thrive Global, Entrepreneur, Forbes, and more. Welcome, Bri.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. And, as I'm preparing and I'm, getting your stuff together, which is like, I know these things and still putting it together and reading it. And I think about when we first met back in 2017, I had to look this up, right? 2017, that's been 4 years. And to think about the journey that you and I have both been on, but especially you. And, I was so taken aback and I wonder, does this sink in ever for you? Are you ever just like, oh yeah, that's happened?
I go back and forth. So the Good Morning America thing was recent. It happened in May or June. I don't remember. I have moments where I'm just like, oh, that's a big deal. But I'm also, I just tend to be, I don't know if you've done the leadership, what's it called? The Strengths Finder. And one of my traits within the Strengths Finder is futuristic. And so it's a lot for me to presence myself. It takes actual tangible, pausing to presence myself enough to be like, wow, this is happening in the moment. Because usually what happens is okay, I was on this thing or this thing happened or whatever. How do I now take that and leverage that for the next thing? And so because I future pace a lot, I've really had to learn how to slow myself down and be in the moment and be like, I did that. That's a big deal. And, giving myself permission to celebrate, I think is one of my strengths and gifts. I'm always celebrating something, but yeah, it's taken practice.
Yes. And I'm glad that you mentioned the permission piece, but there was something that you mentioned that I want to make sure that listeners and viewers understand when you talk about future pacing. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So I just live a lot into the possibility, and I'll explain this a little bit through the eyes of Abraham Hicks. And I know you have listened to Abraham Hicks in the past. For anyone that hasn't, you're welcome to look them up on YouTube. There's a ton of videos, but it's basically this woman who channels an entity called Abraham. So basically channeling source. And one of the things she says is that your present moment is old news. So what happens as we create our lives, the ideas that we have, the things we desire, what we want to manifest first begins as energy inside of us. And we build that energy inside of us and we get into alignment with that energy inside of us. And then and only then does it show up in our physical world. So your physical world is a reflection of where your energetic state was 6 to 12 months ago. So my present moment, I'm like, oh, this is what I've created as a result of what I was doing 6 months ago. So if I know that I want to be somewhere else in 6 months, I have to adjust my energy now, today, in accordance with that vision so that my physical world can shift in response to that. So that's where I'm always kind of semi living in the present moment because physically I'm here, but also energetically living in the future moment because
Mhm.
living in the future moment now means that that's going to be the world that I'm living in 6 months. Hopefully that wasn't too heady.
Yes. Pause, rewind, and re-listen to get this, because I mean, I understand because we've talked about this so much, but there are still moments where I have to remind myself of that because it's so easy to just get like wrapped up in what is or is not happening in the present moment. So I have to refresh myself and re-up that because it does get a little heady and like outside of yourself when you try to take it all in. So repeat listening to this, everyone, so that you can get this. Oh, well, and like I said in the beginning, you are someone who is so inspiring to me, Bri, and you have done things that I truly believe are so courageous, where you just get an idea and you jump on it. And I would love to start there and just hearing from you, when you hear the word courage, what does that mean to you?
For me, I believe courage. And like you mentioned, I've taken a lot of really big leaps in my life, like so many leaps, starting when I was very, very, very little. But even when I was 20, I up and moved to Italy. It was my first international flight, my first passport stamp, my first time, you know, ever leaving the country basically on my own in a country that I didn't know the language, like all sorts of stuff, right? And I just did it. I just ripped the band-aid
Mhm.
off and did it. And that's like one of probably 50 examples that I could give you. And so for me, courage is, and again, talking about the inner world versus the outer world, is having that idea or that spark on the inside and then taking action on it on the outside without questioning it, or without questioning it a lot, right? Because the questioning thing, I think, lives within us often, especially if we're doing this for the first time. Regardless of what your circumstances look like, regardless of what your family thinks you should or shouldn't do, regardless of whether or not your peer group agrees, just trusting that intuitive hit and then taking action on that, for me, is the biggest source of
Mhm.
courage. And like I said, I have definitely flexed that muscle so many times in my lives. From I've made 5 cross country moves in the last 3 years. I've started 3 different businesses. I'm getting ready to start my 4th business with my mom. And it's just always those sparks, those seeds.
Mhm.
And if you don't take action on it, then you never have the opportunity to know whether or not it's going to be a possibility for you. So having the courage to say yes to those unseen variables in your
Mhm.
life, I think
Mhm.
is the definition of that.
Yeah. And I am interested to hear you talk about like, what was that? You talked about the sparks that you get, and what is the decision or what is the permission that you have to give yourself to do that? Thinking about your book, Permission to Leap.
Yeah, I think for me, I get a feeling in my body of knowing whether or not this is an intuitive hit to pursue or an intuitive
Mhm.
hit to kind of let go of. And
Mhm.
so, like, for example, when I shut down my fashion business, or when I decided to write my book, or when I knew it was time to leave LA, when those intuitive hits came, they came accompanied with almost like a visceral knowing that that
Mhm.
was the right next step for me. And the ones that have come that haven't had that visceral knowing, then I know that my job is to hold space and just to sit in the spaciousness of the possibility, to then feel into whether or not it feels aligned to take action on that in my life or not. So I don't know if it's as much of a permission as it is
Mm.
granting myself the spaciousness to
Mm.
explore whether or not it feels aligned within my body to move forward, either at that time, not at all, or sometime in the future.
So, when you talk about granting yourself the permission to hold space for that spark to see, if it does become that intuitive hit or if it is influence. And I'm interested to hear you talk about, how do you, or do you, and I feel like I know the answer to this, but how do you stand in that and not let the outside influences of the talking heads or social media or experts, so-called experts, how do you temper your decision to be patient with those outside messages that can so easily influence so many people?
Yeah, so I definitely will say that the more and more and more and more you do this, the clearer and clearer and clearer it gets as to
Mhm,
what's influencing your feelings.
mhm,
I've gotten to the point, I've been practicing this for a long time, and I've gotten to the point where now, like, pretty much outside influences, like, just don't even, like, I can see them and I can recognize that they're there, but they don't even permeate me anymore because I just
mhm,
don't live my life for other people. But at the beginning, what I really recommend doing is, if you have, a thought come in or a feeling come in that's like, oh, this is scary,
yeah,
where is that coming from? Is
mhm,
that coming from something that your parents taught you? Is that something that's coming from, what society teaches us or the patriarchy teaches us? Is that something that a boss said to you at some point? Is that something that a teacher discouraged you from doing something at
mhm,
some point? Or is it truly that there's a little bit of fear associated with it just coming from within you? And then the question always becomes, okay, well, is this the fear that's the good kind of fear that should push me towards and motivate me to do the thing because it's simply outside my comfort zone?
mhm,
Or is there like a deeper fear of like lack of safety or something like that? Right.
mm,
And so, really, a lot of it just takes, like you said, patience and discernment, and a lot of, journaling it out,
mm,
and just continuing to ask yourself, like, where is this coming from? Oh, I got this thought that came in that said, like, oh, you can't ever make money as an entrepreneur. Where's that coming from? That was a
mm,
story that my mom told a lot. And she was an entrepreneur and she believed for so long she couldn't make money at it. Pretty much up until I started doing this manifestation work. She started taking one of my classes, and then they started making bank on one of their Airbnbs, and like all sorts of other stuff started unfolding, right? But I had to disconnect myself from this story that I had been told from my mom, that as an entrepreneur, I couldn't make money, because I knew that if I held on to that story, then as an entrepreneur, I would never make any money in my business. And so
mm.
I've been able to shift over the last 6 years that narrative within myself by simply being present to it, witnessing it, continuing to disconnect from it, rewrite what I actually want my reality to look like, and reaffirming that on a regular basis.
Mm. I love that you mentioned the stories that we tell ourselves or that we have held on to from wherever, right? Whether it's our families, because that's the first place that we start hearing stories and beliefs about certain things. But then certainly as we go through our careers, and so for people that recognize that there is a narrative that is repeating, that's keeping them where they are, what is your guidance for them to let go of, or even just kind of like relook at that narrative?
Yeah. So, similarly to what I just said, obviously, one, the
Mhm,
awareness is the first
mhm.
step. If you don't know that this pattern is repeating within you, if you don't recognize that you're telling these stories over and over again, you cannot change them.
Yeah.
So, awareness is the first step. The second
Mhm.
step is to dig deeper, like we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Whose is this? Where did this even
Mhm.
come from? Is this mine? Is this not mine? Then you have to decide, do I want to keep this or not? Right? Like, even though it's not serving you, you can still choose to hold on to it.
Mhm.
That's your free will. You get to do whatever you want in your life. So you can hold on to it and hold yourself back. You can let go of it and move forward. Totally up to you. You decide that you want to let go of it, then you have to decide, okay, what's going to go in its place? So if
Mm.
I'm not going to believe this anymore, what am I going to believe instead? What is going to be my narrative that replaces this? And then you have to repeat that narrative over and over and over and over and over again. And this is the step that I think people really underestimate, because they're like, oh, I changed my beliefs one time and now I'm going to move out into the world and like my beliefs are going to be changed. Unfortunately, our brains don't exactly work that way. I've done a lot of studying of just like brain science and
Mm.
neural pathways and all of that stuff. Like, the neural pathways that you have for the belief systems that you have been in your life for a long time, at least decades, like at least 2 decades, depending on how old you are, maybe 4 decades or 5 decades. So thinking one new thought once is not going to change 3, 4, or 5 decades worth of ingrained habits and thought patterns in your mind. So the repetition factor becomes really, really, really important. And I write about this in Permission to Leap, is how, like, if you're changing a simple habit, such as I want to drink an extra glass of water every single day, you can do that within, I think it's like 90 days to 120 days or whatever, right? If you are literally changing a habit that is deeply ingrained into like who you are and how you show up in the world, it is probably going to take you more like 9 to 12 months of repetition every day, multiple times a day, to make sure that that new thought pattern sticks. So I don't want people to watch this and be like, oh, I'm just going to do this exercise that Bri taught me to do, and then like done. It doesn't work that way. So make sure that you're building in the longevity of the practice to make sure that it actually sticks.
I mean, it really is building that muscle, because these stories, these habits that have been ingrained, because our brain wants to do what's comfortable, right? Our brain wants to do what's safe and what it's used to doing. And, a lot of these things that we encounter, the doubts, the stories, the fears, et cetera, those are things that are designed to really weigh us down. And so you have to have that muscle strength built in so that you can say, okay, I see this and I feel this, and I'm still going to keep moving forward. I'm still going to give this a whirl.
Yeah. And the thing that I'll say too, and I've mentioned, like, I've been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
I still have to go through this exact same process. Like, I am not immune to any of this. And in fact, I'm working on one right now for myself. So like, I'm not special. I don't drink any sort of magical juice. Like there's, like I have to go through the same stuff. So if you're struggling with this, please know that you're not the only one struggling with this. All of us struggle with this. There are days that I fall off just like everyone else. Even though I've been doing this for like a decade in my own life. So just, be patient with yourself, give yourself a break, and keep showing up.
Yes. And so you mentioned that that you're using this on you right now. What are some fears that you're noticing that are popping up that you're having to work this muscle?
So the biggest one that I've been working on, and I just had a huge healing session around it this week, is that I've had this just constant pattern and belief system that money's always going to run out. And so I did a really intense healing session around it this week. And I think it's a combination, and whatever anyone watching this believes, I think it's a combination of like a past life and a childhood experience. And so I've just been working through it. And of course, we know that when we kind of like muddy the waters of something, it comes up even stronger. And so this week I've been navigating a lot through, like, I feel really good and I know it worked and the healing is there and I'm moving in that right momentum. And at the same time, all of the old stories and the patterns and the beliefs have been like rearing their ugly head around, like, even if it's not true, they still present themselves. So that's the biggest one that I've been working through, is that like money's going to run out. And it's funny because it doesn't even matter how much money I have in my bank account. The fear is like always there. And so I'm just so ready in my life to like get rid of it. I'm so over it. I've been playing that game for way too long. And I'm just like, it is time for a new script.
Yes. Oh my gosh. The new script. That's something that I have to work on too. And I will say, you talking about like this fear that money is going to go away, no matter what the bank account looks like. And I will say, I noticed that popping up for myself recently, of like, even though I'm having, some recent success points that are happening, and in the back of my head, it's like, oh, well, you better hold on to this, right? Like, hold on tight. And I know that's the opposite of what I should be doing, because that energetic exchange, right? Like, I know you've talked about how, money is energy, right? And it's a way for you to be in service and expand your service. And so I am having to work that muscle of thinking, okay, don't hoard, don't hold on to that, because that's not the energy that you want to be in right now.
Well, the thing that's so interesting about this is that most people think, like, when they're in a situation where they're not making, say, a lot of money in their
Mhm.
business, they think that all of this stuff is going to be solved when they are making money in their business. They think, like,
Mm,
well, it's because I'm not making any money right now. So when I am making all that money, it's just going to solve itself. But the
yeah.
interesting thing is, I have this fear more when I have like really, really, really good months than when I have the bad months. Because at the bad months, I'm like, oh, I'm used to like operating off of,
Mm,
$0. So like I'm
mhm.
fine. I'm gonna come through this. It's not a big deal. But when I have more money in my bank account, it's like, oh my God, what if? Like, what if it all goes away? What if this? What if that? And so just a reminder to people listening too, that like external validation is not the solution to the narratives and the stories that are going on within you. It's actually probably only going to make them worse. And until you can go in and literally do this process of uprooting them for yourself, you're going to continue to cycle through all the same old patterns and habits and neural pathways and all of that stuff.
Well, and something you just said, this came up with in a client call where, essentially choosing the hard, because when you talked about when you're having those slow months, right? When you're used to operating more leanly and you're like, okay, well, I'm used to not having anything. I'm used to not, working in excess right now. And even though in those moments of lean months that you want something more, that you're comfortable with the less, right? As opposed to what could be possible if I let in this new story? What if I moved towards this new life or this new scenario? And that feels hard, right? Like all the things that you'll have to figure out when you get to that new level. And so it's like choosing the devil versus the devil you don't. Do you hear that come up a lot?
Oh, totally. And really, like, so, our say your comfort zone right now is like operating very leanly and like operating off of $0 on a
Mhm.
regular basis.
Mhm.
Zeros and an exaggeration, but whatever.
Yes, yes.
Um, what if, like, what would it be like for you to be comfortable operating super
Mhm.
flush all the time,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Like having extra, 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 extra money in the bank. Like
Mhm.
how could that become your comfort zone instead? And flex, like learning how to flex that muscle and develop that as your comfort zone
Mhm.
over anything else, I think is, a huge thing. We do really, like you mentioned earlier, just tend towards what we know or what we've known, not
Yeah.
because we want it, but because it's just what is there and what we think
Mhm.
is available. And so,
Mhm.
similarly to like what I was talking about earlier, one thing that I have people do a lot is like you have to envision and imagine and basically create the
Yeah.
vision of yourself that you want to have on the inside before it manifests or you create it on the
Mhm.
outside.
Mhm.
So, what would it be like for money to be available to you in any quantity you wanted at any moment of any day? What would it be like for you
Mhm.
to have that cushion all the time, non-negotiably, no matter what? And like the more that you can create that and imagine that and feel into that now, the easier it's going to be for you to make that your reality in the future.
That is so in line. I saw someone on social media, they posted, I don't if it was a tweet, someone got reshared on Instagram, whatever. But they were saying, they started out the post by saying, I bought an apartment building. Like, I invested in this thing, this big thing. And then the next line was, actually, I didn't, but I want to get used to saying that. I want to know what it feels like to be able to say that. And it's like,
Mm,
that is that, like getting into that place of like, let me tell you what just happened. Like, this is amazing because we all know what that feels like to get that really big win, right? Like, you get the job that you've been pushing for, or you get that raise that you've been asking for, or, whatever it is, you bought the car that you've been dreaming of. Um, and you know what that feels like to get that thing that has been out of reach for some time. And so I love that. because it ties in with what you were just saying.
So I actually have, I created a mastermind earlier this year with three girlfriends, who all three of us are building $1 million businesses.
Mhm.
Sorry, four of us. And we have a WhatsApp thread just between the four of us. And we don't do it every day, but most days we voice memo each other. And we
Mm.
use this process. The first thing we do is we always express gratitude for what we're grateful for in that moment. And we speak it out, right? We do voice memos. And then the second part of the message is today was an absolutely incredible day. And so we do this early in the morning
Yeah.
and we recall how amazing our day was, what came through, what our experience was for the day, what our predominant feeling was for the day. And then we also at the end cement in the big goal that we're leaning towards. So today,
Mm.
mine was, I feel more and more and more like the millionairess that I was born to be every
Mm.
single day. And, I just feel like I can feel it in my body. It's like my experience in the outer world, like all of that stuff. And so it's really fun to literally just be able to like speak into existence all of the things. And it gets you into a super high vibe state. Two, it
Yeah.
sets your intentions for the day. And then three, it gets you into alignment with that big vision that you've been working towards. So even if you can find one accountability buddy to maybe start the
Mhm.
practice with, or just voice memo yourself, right? Like it doesn't matter. But just like speaking those things into an
Yeah.
existence is such a powerful practice.
It really is. And just you talking about that, like thinking about doing that for myself, I'm like, ooh, what would I say today? It
I
feels good just thinking about it. It feels really good.
I mean, I predicted today that like I had the most amazing interview with one of my former clients and like we just had great energy together and we had so much fun and and granted I knew it was going to be like that no matter what because that's just what you and I do. But, like setting the intention and I had a really great meeting with my marketing team right before this and they gave me like a ton of great news which they
Mm.
did. And I have a potential partnership meeting this afternoon with a new friend in Tulsa.
Ooh.
I have a date tonight, like all sorts of stuff. And so I've already spoken into existence what my intentions are about how today is going to play out. And then you get to sit back and be like, oh, today, like all those things played out. And like, I created that. Like, I did
Yes.
that.
Yes. Oh, I have goosebumps right now. So talking about setting intentions and having these visions and goals and ideas, right? Like maybe not even anything big, but you have this idea. And I know, there are so many people that have a goal or vision or an idea that keeps coming to them, but they're not taking action on it because they're making fear more important. For that person that is watching or listening, what is your one piece of advice for them to do?
So I'm a little bit of a rule breaker. I'm going to give you two.
Okay.
So the first one is you have to make your fear of staying where you are bigger than your fear of where you're going. I think that's one
Mhm.
of the biggest ones is like, if I were to stay in this where I'm at right now today for the rest of my life, would I be satisfied? And I
Mm.
know it can be really easy to just go on day after day after day and like not actually answer that question, but I challenge you to actually answer that question. And if the answer is no, I would not be satisfied, you need to fucking do something and you need to do it today. So
Yeah.
that's my first piece of advice. And then the second piece of advice would be get some accountability.
Yeah.
It is amazing that when you can put some skin in the game, like
Mhm.
when I hired my first coach, I all of a sudden didn't have a choice. I had to succeed. I had to. I did not have another option, and I couldn't back out because
Mhm.
I had a lot of skin in the game. I had more skin in the game than I had available to myself at the time that I made the agreement. So, it's like when you set yourself up to succeed and you literally do not give yourself an option to fail, it is amazing what you can
Yeah.
create for yourself. So
Yeah.
put some money in the game, get some accountability, hire someone that is not going to let you quit and see what you can create for yourself in literally a very short amount
Yeah.
of time. I could tell you stories that would blow your mind about clients I've had. That, like, I had a client who owned a blog and she really wanted to quit her job, but she was terrified. She was making 10 grand
Mhm,
a month at her job. And she was like,
mhm,
there's no way I could ever replace my salary.
mhm,
She's like, but I want to quit my job within 9 months. She gave herself 9 months.
mhm.
I think she quit her job in month 4 of us working together or something,
Wow.
because she replaced her income like so quickly. And
Wow.
now 5 years later, she has 2 7-figure businesses. Like,
Wow.
yeah. So when you get some accountability, when you can hire someone that can literally help you and
Mhm,
not just like keep you accountable, but like
mhm,
give you what you need to help you take the
mhm.
steps forward, you can move mountains. But
Yeah,
the first step is you saying, I am unwilling to stay where I'm
yeah,
at and I need to
yeah.
do something about this today.
Yes, yes. Choose the possibility. Choose that over staying comfortable and in pain, even though you know that discomfort and pain. No, let's create a new knowledge base of what is possible.
Yes.
Oh, Bri, as always, I enjoy our conversations so much and all the wisdom and gems that you drop on a consistent basis. I am so appreciative. And I'm sure that people listening are appreciative. And I would love for them to know where they can connect with and learn more about you and all that you are doing.
Yes. So, two places. The first one is my website. Obviously, you can learn about all my offerings, figure out which one is most aligned for you. And my website is briseeley.com. And then my favorite place to hang out where you can actually like talk to me is Instagram. And my handle, again, Bri Seeley, super easy. If you do connect with me on Instagram, please send me a DM and tell me that you saw me on Kia's show. And I respond back to all of my genuine DMs. If you're pitching me or selling me or trying to get me to like, buy followers, I will not respond to you. But if you say, I saw you on Kia's show, you're probably going to get a voice memo back from me. So please say hello.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bri. And we will include all of Bri's information in the show notes. So just take a look below. Again, Bri.
Bri Seeley.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so thankful that you joined today. And thank you all for listening and paying attention and tuning in. We appreciate you so much. Until the next time, see you again.